Greetings, adventurers, and welcome to the Micflayers podcast. Do you have a moment to spare to talk about the lore of my D&D world? No, wait, come back, please. Greetings, folks. My name is Martin O'Dwyer, and I'll be your host for today. And joining me, as always, is your host, Conor O'Brien. How are we doing today, Conor?
Weird of you brave of you, I would even say, Martin, to open up the podcast with a blatant lie, because no lore drop takes more than a moment. As we all know, there's no such thing as. Let me just explain this little bit of background. Bull. Let me stop everything for 5 minutes minimum, and I will explain to you in excruciating detail what's going on.
Let me sing you the song of my people, indeed.
Yeah.
How's it going, buddy?
Pretty good. I made a GIF for. It wasn't a GIF. It was just a meme. I forgot my internet terms. For the Irish Simpsons fan page once, and it was, you know, the scene in Simpsons where Bart is like, let me review my screenplay. He's like, is it since within this day already? Yeah. Except the caption was, okay, it's fine. Let me just read to you about my D&D world. And it's like, so when the gods first made the elves, and it just trails off that.
Oh man, why does it always start with so the gods first made the elves? Because I'm like, I have a little bit of my next world written, and it is the gods first made the elves again.
I honestly, yeah, I don't know. Elves. Here's the thing, because I feel like when we're making D&D worlds, we often like. I'm already getting into like deeper stuff here. But like, here's the thing: we're building new worlds. We're trying to diversify, and we always try to be like, I don't necessarily want to do just a general Tolkien world where here's the Dark Lord and the elves are over here and the humans or whatever, and I want to try and put my own spin on it. But the problem is we're using the same building blocks because we're playing a game where mechanically elves and dwarves and stuff have to function a certain way. It kind of informs what their culture will likely be like, and therefore, you know, it's really hard to not have the elves be the, for lack of a better term, kind of the master race. They are kind of the perfect race, because they are smart and they live a long time and they're healthy and they're gorgeous and everything, and everything about them, they're so magically inclined, but also they're the best warriors. Like, everything about them is so like perfect. It's kind of hard not to decide that the world started with them, you know.
And like that is basically, you're super right. That is basically like the Western European fantasy, is that like elves, and it's particularly like Tolkien in particular, but like elves are these perfect creatures. They were the first created. They're very much like they're clearly like an analog for angels, like, because, you know, there's like Eru Ilúvatar created he created the Maya and the do you know what? Let's not get into the real like nitty gritty of like the creation.
Let's get into a real deep dive on Tolkien's Catholicism and how that translated into the creation of Middle Earth.
Like that. It's not like as obvious as it is with C.S. Lewis, which is very obvious. Lion.
Oh, well, he just didn't even change the names.
Yeah.
He was like, these are daughters of Adam or daughters of Eve and sons of Adam. Like, he's just really on the nose.
Oh yeah, and then like the lion dying for the kid's sins in the first movie to like defeat the witch and all that. Yeah. But no, it with Tolkien it is a little less obvious. But like, yeah, they're clearly like these like semi-angelic or divine beings in some way. And even in like the D&D rules, they're like, if you go by the Forgotten Realms pantheon, like they were like created by Corellon. I'm right? Am I saying that right? Corellon Letharion. My brain
I think it's Corellon. I could be wrong on that. I'm also getting mixed up with the word Corellian in my head, but that's a Star Wars thing.
That would explain why I didn't know it.
I think it's Corellon is the elven god in that. But yeah, like, it's hard not to put them in that kind of even when you're creating the worlds, it's hard not to have them be the first people. I did avoid it in my current world.
Yeah, the Titans were first, right?
So like there is no real first race in the sense, like the Titans, the elementals were the ones who created the planet that created Asteria, but I'm literally my own meme now. But
you fell into my trap.
I didn't necessarily say, and this race rose up. It was like the giants were the first ones, and they were given dominion or whatever, and because they were like so strong, they would tame the wildness of all the elemental stuff. But after the fall of the giants, like all the other races just kind of came about, kind of like evolutionary wise. Like
Yeah.
there is no creation myth of dwarves. Well, sort of in my world. They kind of just they were somewhere underground, and then they kind of just made their way to the surface. And now there's some of them live on the surface, and some
Like
live underground.
carrots.
Sorry, like carrots, yeah. Um, and some of them are just as orange with their big beards and stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
No.
and then like with humans as well, there's no creation myth to humans. They just kind of like in like evolution wise, just kind of came about over time.
Yeah.
And most races in my world adopted gods rather than were created specifically by them. Um,
Yeah.
so the only difference being the elves actually, but the elves come from the moon in my world, which was made by Ashilva, the Fey
Yeah.
elven goddess, and she made the Fey moon and all the elves and everything. And then at a certain point, a lot of them were exiled down to Asteria. So yeah, I there again though. I've kind of even though I've avoided it with every other race in my setting where they're all like, oh, this kind of happened, and then they have found their gods over time.
Mm.
Again, the elves are the holy ones created directly by our gods, and yeah, we
Yeah.
fall back into the same pitfalls constantly.
I sort of unintentionally managed to avoid it in my current world because I never explicitly stated like what any like that any race was like older than another.
Mm.
In my world, what happened is the basically like there was the first god, the god like the primeval god of the void and darkness, and then he created like he essentially like just wanted like companionship or like some other reflections of himself, and so he
Yeah,
split like small pieces off his own essence and created the like elemental gods, so like light, fire, earth, water, that kind of stuff. And then it was those gods that created the planet that they like the existence and reality in my world in my world called near Quebec, and like they created that world and they created all of the mortal races on it. So that's like all basically like elves, humans, lizard folk. Actually, no, lizard folk I have a different thing for, but like and dragonborn too. Actually, they come from the same thing. But like when in terms of like yeah, your standard fantasy races like your halflings, your humans, your elves, your dwarves, that kind of stuff, they were all directly created by like the combined efforts of those like original primordial elemental gods, and then they had like another generation of gods that are the more like nuanced stuff, and then as civilization has advanced and like things become more nuanced in reality, so too do the gods. So it goes from like air and earth and water to like harvest and war and vengeance and love and justice and
yeah,
like more complex things like that. Um, so like the racist thing, they're just kind of in my head. I don't think I've ever actually told to my players, but like at least in my head, it's the thing where like the world was created, then the world was populated with life, and that was basically most of the races that currently exist in near Quebec. The reptilian races came in through an incursion from Tiamat like centuries later. Then.
okay, that's cool. Yeah, I like I was gonna say, oh, I had a thing. Okay, this is going back really far. This is pre me playing D&D.
Ooh.
And I liked drawing maps and coming up with like lore and fantasy stuff in my head. Um, but again, it was all very kind of Tolkien in
Mm.
its kind of design. So I had this like four kind of continent world, kind of three of them surrounding one central one, and the central one is like where humans were the first race. I didn't have like too many. I really only had
Yeah.
elves, dwarves, and humans, I think. Um, I did actually, yeah, that was it. And humans were the very first race, but some humans became more because they stayed on the island.
Gotcha.
This is gonna sound an awful lot like Numenor, but actually, I didn't know anything about Numenor at the time I wrote this, or
But like
came
Atlantis
up with it.
is like Numenor is an
It was kind
Atlantis
of
analogy.
Yeah, a little bit, but this central island has a tower that was built by elves or by the people that would be elves because they were all very magically inclined and
Mm.
stuff like that, and very powerful. And they built this tower, and they kind of used the tower almost like to update themselves, like update their own software. Where as if you're on the island, the tower is in the dead center of the island, and it fits out across the whole thing. So if the elves became so magically inclined that they started like just editing little bits of themselves, and you're like, okay, we should all be just a little bit more attractive. So I'll just take that slider and bump it up a little bit there, and we should all be like a little bit taller, and our our hair should be again. They're all just kind of doing all this stuff, but that's what eventually that's what elves were born in that world. They were men, they were humans, and then they edited themselves to be better than humans. So that's why elves are like superhuman in that world. And then dwarves are humans that kind of just basically went to go live underground. They started like mining out the underground and stuff like that, and they just evolved to be shorter and stockier and stuff like that. And then they just became known as dwarves, but they're still kind of technically all human, just variants of humans.
Okay. Sorry, I'm listening. I had a really good idea for something to talk about later. I was like, if I don't write this down now, I'll forget about it for the entire podcast.
But I remember having that thing. I had a whole like I in my head I had notions of this is me as a teenager now. I had notions of writing a fantasy book.
I still have notions of writing a fantasy book, dude. It's why I'm a
every now and again, if ever I get my my brain chemistry under control, maybe it'll happen. I feel like honestly, I constantly feel like I'm this is gonna sound weird. I constantly feel like I'm Bradley Cooper at the start of Limitless, when he's just like a slacker and stuff, and he has so much potential, but he just can't like focus anywhere. I'd love to be able to take a pill where I'm like, if I could just harness all of this energy in my brain and focus it into one thing, I know I could do something decent. But I had a cool thing in that world though, where there was lots of different variants of elves. There was like snow elves who lived up north, and there was the main elves that lived on that island. But there was blood elves, which were basically just vampires, because they found this kind of infinite well of blood, and it gave them great strength, but it made them into something what we in the real world would call vampires, and they do get called that in the world as well. But they're just a variant of elves, so they're also long-lived. They're not undead, they're just long-lived and monstrous, and they consume blood, but they can only really stay in this one little corner of the continent, because it's near. They can leave that, but again, sunlight is everywhere else. That corner is always blotted out and dark, and it's near to where the well is. But if they leave, that they not only didn't have to contend with sunlight and people being hostile towards them, but they also have to find a source of blood, so they will have to kill people to feed on them and stuff. The whole plot, like the vampires are like the main antagonists of the world, and there was a whole throne being usurped by the king's brother, and the king's son was like on the run and had to like try and steal it back from his uncle and stuff like that. It was actually like a 3-part story where there's like 3 separate quests going on. And then there was another one where it was your typical young fella who meets an old wizard and gets brought off on the adventure. But the 3 of these are happening in sequence, and they kind of meet up eventually. Yeah.
One of those was just Hamlet.
Well, yeah, true.
Or the Lion King. Take your pick.
What's the writing thing that's like only 4 stories or something like that to be told? Or
there's
is
like,
it 4?
I think it's either is it not like it's either 4 or like 5. I think.
Yeah, it's something like there's only so many like X amount of stories in existence, because everything is just a variation on this base idea. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's weird. Like, as much as a massive fantasy nerd I am, like literally the only thing I really read when it comes to books is fantasy. And like actually I'm gonna go back to what I was talking about, but I heard a really really great justification from Brandon Sanderson. About people look down on fantasy as a genre because it's dragons and it's it's like it's all fantasy make believe, it's not real. He was at like a party or a convention or something, and he was talking to someone else who was another writer, or someone asked him, they're like, Brandon, you're such a talented writer, like why do you write fantasy? As if like, why are you like stooping low to write fantasy? Slumming it, thank you, that's definitely what the word I was looking for there. But he was saying, it was like, okay, so let's say I don't write fantasy, let's say I write a crime thriller. Now if I put a dragon in that crime thriller, people are going to call me a hack and tell me, what the hell am I doing, I've ruined that book and it makes no sense whatsoever. And they're like, okay. And he's like, if I write a fantasy book and I put a crime heist in my fantasy book, nobody blinks an eye. He's like,
that's true.
He's like, if I write a romantic comedy and I put a pitched medieval battle in that romantic comedy, I have ruined the romantic comedy. He's like, if I put a romantic comedy plotline in my fantasy book I have enhanced my fantasy book. He said fantasy is a genre that can do all other genres, and that is why I read fantasy as well.
That's kind of an interesting way to think about it. Actually, it's like fantasy is almost, it's like a higher umbrella term than other genres. Like you can have crime, thriller, romance, action, mystery, all these things,
Yep.
but all of those fit neatly under the umbrella of fantasy or sci-fi or real world stuff. So there should be like some other descriptive term for that greater clarification or classification of books or any media really, to be like, yeah, because again, I really like that.
Yeah, sorry, it just popped into my head there, and I love that quote, so I just had to spit it out in the podcast here. It's such a good justification for it, like, because people, like, I have had that with people where like, oh, what are you reading? I was like, oh, I'm reading this. Oh, it's a fantasy book. It's like, oh yeah, I'm not reading my style. Like, and I get that, like, tastes are tastes, but like,
oh yeah, sure, but
yeah, like fantasy, literally, you can do anything. Like, you can do anything, and it's fine because it's fancy.
I mean, when you think about it, like, I mean, that isn't that exactly where Game of Thrones was so successful? Like, people who would never watch, who maybe have seen Lord of the Rings but are not like the fans of it that levels that you and me are and stuff.
Yeah.
Or people who like don't care about, Star Wars always seems silly because it was space magic and all this other blah, blah. And like, I don't like any of these kind of dragons and all this stuff. But when you write again, like
a political thriller, basically.
Yeah, exactly. George R. R. Martin basically wrote a political thriller. But set in a medieval fantasy background, and it was one of the biggest. It still is one of the biggest things in the world.
House of the Dragon is so good.
Yeah, but like it's a good point because you can absolutely have the setting be something different, but the genre still be romance. And like Game of Thrones has all that. Game of Thrones has romance and it has action and it has mystery and everything like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't. I just love that quote. And sorry, I suppose we probably like near 20 minutes into the reason we're talking about all this and world building and all this stuff is because today we're going to talk about lore, because lore is a bit of a weird and interesting but fun and sometimes difficult thing in D&D, in that when you find, I find anyway for me, when you find your groove in writing lore, it feels like the easiest and most fun thing in the world, and you're basically just going, oh, that's cool, that's cool, that's cool, that's cool. But then when you have a deadline coming up and you're really struggling and really trying hard to write cool lore, that's when you're like, why can I not think of anything?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to chat a little bit about that today. And what I was saying was, before I started quoting the man himself, Brando Sando, as Daniel B. Green refers to him. Like when I was younger, I suppose I mostly read fantasy, but I didn't read anywhere near to the scale I did, particularly when I was like a teenager into my late teens, into my like early 20s. But what I did read was a lot of comic books, and instead of making up like fantasy words, what I used to do, because I really love drawing as well, I would like draw superheroes. I would make up my own superheroes and draw them, and then I would come up with like the story behind them and how they got their powers and all this kind of stuff. And I suppose like it kind of shows that like that you keep that interest up all the way through, like even if it is just reading, regardless of the format, it can like really gets in there, like because like with the comic book stuff, it's something I was thinking about with lore, right? Because of all media that we have, comic books have to have like some of the highest volume and longest running lore, right? Because they've been going like as a whole,
most inconsistent.
Yeah, most inconsistent, most frequently rewritten. But like as a whole, like comic, like the modern like superhero comics, you say, they kind of started. They basically started post World War II. They started in the 40s with the guys who created Superman. Now there was like boys action and adventure comics with like the kind of characters that inspired Indiana Jones and stuff that were running before that, and those kind of like adventure or terror novels where you'll see like you'd obviously see them like really old books in the library, and it'd be like a dude kind of dressed like Indiana Jones with his shirt mostly open, kind of muscly, and with like a whip, and he'd have like a torch, and then there'd be like a woman running towards the cover like in like a ripped shirt with like ripped like shorts, and she's like screaming and looking scared, and there's like a lion somewhere.
It's basically the still artwork for
Temple of
the
Doom?
first Star Wars.
Oh, sorry.
Because when you think about the first Star Wars, kind of had that where like Luke is on the cover, he's stretching upwards, he has the lightsaber in his hand, the beam of the light is like shooting up, and Leia's next to him, kind of like that, but her dress is flowing, and you can see her whole leg because ooh, saucy.
Oh, is that an
and she's kind of like, I think she's holding onto his leg in it, which at the time was like, oh, because he's the male lead, but then like a movie and a half later, it's like, oh, but they're actually siblings. People gloss over that an awful lot. Like, okay, I don't want to go into too much attention, but like people complain a lot about the new Star Wars movies, and I'm hit and miss. Some parts I like and some
Mm-hmm.
parts I don't. But like people complain so much about the nitty gritty, and they get really into like, oh, but this part didn't make sense, and this character was just boring, or blah blah blah. And I'm like, we literally venerate and adore a trilogy of movies where in one movie, in a couple movies, this female character kisses this male character, and there's kind of this maybe kind of this love triangle between these two male characters and this one female character, and then in the third movie we just drop the bomb that no, they're actually brother and sister, and no one ever like people gloss over that like it never happened. We just accept that, and then there's people who were like, I just didn't think Kylo Ren was a really good character. So I'm like, but you will love the original movies, and they are so flawed as well. I love them, but man, they're flawed. Sorry, just needed to go on that little tangent there.
No, you're grand. I could feel that like to quote another movie, a great disturbance in the Force that was coming that way as soon as that got mentioned. No, it's good, but it is a good point. Like even even our most like favorite and cherished like media franchises have like ridiculous wacky stuff in it. Like I love Elden Ring. There is an exact clone of one of the mainline bosses. Well, he's an optional boss, but like one of the bigger kind of more important bosses. There's an exact clone of him in the sewers of the last zone, and like there's no real good reason given for that, as far as I'm aware.
It's just like they wanted to reuse the character model in the animations and stuff.
It's like he's like a less powerful. He's called Moog. He's called Moog the Omen, and like you can fight him, and you fight a couple of omens, or these like godlings that are born, and they have like these twisted horns and stuff, and they're basically sort of equivalent to the deviants in the Marvel lore with the Eternals and deviants. And like so there's one of them. It's Moog, and like you find him in the sewers. He's just called Moog the Omen. But if you go to Moog's palace, he's Moog, Lord of Blood, and he has all these new attacks, and like he does a bunch of other stuff that he doesn't do in the sewer. And it's just so clear that at one point a decision was made here. We're like, no, we're not doing this. We're going this way. What about this? We've coded all this in already. It's grand. Leave it. It'll be fine. They won't care. More bosses. Like it'll be fine. So like. Yeah, it's okay for stuff to kind of like not totally make sense sometimes, or even just some stuff not to pan out the way you necessarily wanted them to with lore.
Yeah.
But Conor, what kind of an approach do you take when you're trying to write lore for Asteria in particular? Because like you have both like written some very very interesting lore for the world we've played in and that I've got to experience, and you've also like delivered it in some pretty interesting ways that like even as I was playing it, I was like, oh no, this is sick. This is like I there was one of them in particular that I was thinking about. I was like, I'm gonna steal this in a few years.
Sorry, remind me, what was the first half of the question?
Oh, sorry, yeah. What kind of approach do you take when you're trying to like write new lore for a series?
Oh, right, yes. Sorry, my brain. Okay, so there's two answers to this. There's the approach I'd like to take, and there's the approach I actually take. And the approach I'd like to take is I would like to, as you guys are entering a new kingdom or area or dungeon or whatever, I would like to go, I wonder who built this, and then think, okay, who built this dungeon? Why did they build it? Is it meant to be like what is its purpose other than the fact that it's a bunch of underground rooms? Was it a prison? Was it a hideout for the king to sequester his secret daughter that he had with someone or something like that? Like what was the point of all this? Well, and likewise with kingdoms, I'd like to be able to go, okay, when was the kingdom founded? What kind of kingdom is it? Are they like are they somehow theocratic? That's the word. Gotta get that out. Theocratic, or are they a monarchy, or are they like a republic, or what are they? And then there's the actual approach I take, which is I kind of wing it some of the time, and then the times when I'm not winging it and I am planning ahead. I'm planning ahead for something that isn't going to come. Like I'll be like, oh, do you know what'd be cool? If there was this kind of like nation down here in this part of the continent that did this thing. That's a really cool idea. And then I'll write that instead of the thing I need for next D&D session, which is you're going to this entirely different kingdom. Because that's how my brain works.
I know, I totally get that. I'm in the middle of writing like the like werewolf invasion kind of arc I did like last Halloween around for my guys. I just broke off and started writing stuff for like literally what's going to be probably like 19th level content. Like they were like level 10 maybe.
Yeah, like like in an ideal world, I would be focused on that. But the thing is, I know how my brain works mostly, and it's like it's kind of like there's definitely an example in pop culture that I'm trying to remember here, but I don't entirely know what it is. But it's like my brain is like this kind of like spinning. Imagine like a circular table that's just spinning, right?
Mm.
Um, and like there's paint all over the top of it. So every now and again, a slew of paint will spit out one side and slap into like a nearby canvas.
Right.
I can then take that canvas and go, that actually looks quite good. Was it the thing I intended to happen? No. Was it the thing I wanted to happen? No. But this is probably something I can use later. So I will take that and I will stuff that away in a note on my phone or a notebook or a notepad or on a dock somewhere, because I also am not consistent in where I store this information.
You and me both, pal.
Yeah, I literally have like OneNote and Google Docs and notepads and everything and notes on my phone. But so I know that's how my brain works. If I take that same principle and I go, I want a painting that looks like this. The fact of the matter is that the spinning table with the paint on it is just not going to spit out exactly what I want it to. So I need to take these other elements, throw them all in a big pile, and then later on I can pull out that piece when I need it, or I can try to sort through that pile to make some sort of sense of the lunacy that I've come up with, you know?
Yeah, I was looking there through my notes app to see if I still had them, but I actually did a clean out of my notes app when I had done all the plot points.
I do have my notes app.
Oh, actually, hang on. If you can, how close are you? Okay, stall for 1 second. I gotta go run into the other room, and actually, you know what? It'll be such an unbelievable amount of hassle just to move everything on. It's fine. No, I have So I used to have a forest of post-it notes behind my DM screen. Like when I closed my DM screen, I had to be really careful when I was closing, so I wouldn't like crush all the notes.
Okay.
And like 2 weeks ago, I finally got to take all but 6 away, and oh my god, I can see all the conditions on the back of my DM screen now. But I have all those post-it notes in my bag in my room across the hall, and they'd be really useful for this because they have like basically my very like bullet pointy, quick to the note. Like I'm coming up with like as soon as I go, okay, so this is an area. This is the theme of the area. What the culture is like. This is how it's similar to how we were saying. You know, like I would go like, this is the place's name. What kind of how is it governed? Like what's its military like? What's its main thing it's known for? Like what's its like religiously, you know, in terms of like how does that function and all that kind of stuff. How many cities are there? How do those cities work? That kind of stuff like that.
You gotta use the sperm method.
I'm let you explain that one, Connor.
So this is the thing. I brought it up on the podcast before.
I feel like I've heard you say that before, but I don't want to take a guess at what those initials of that acronym stand for.
Yeah. So it was the thing. Some people call it sperm because honestly it's easier to remember. But other people call it MERPs, which again, if you remember MERPs, great. But when we were in school in geography, this is what they told us, and our teacher said it to us, and she's like, "I know you're all fucking 16, 17-year-old boys. You're gonna laugh at this, but the thing is, you'll remember it because it's funny."
Well, 14 years later, Connor.
Here we are. So yeah, it is social, political, economic, religious, military. And if you think about any kingdom or setting or place in those five aspects, you will pretty much cover most things. And you can, if you decidedly make each of them different, you can make them like you can make a super interesting setting with that. Like social can be like what's important to the everyday people here. You know what's important to them. Political is obviously what type of political structure you might have. Economic might be like what does this place do? What does this city or town or whatever do that makes it economically viable? Is it a mining town? Is it manufacturing? Is it just a trading port? So lots of stuff comes through here and there's like tariffs and stuff like that. Religious is obviously what is a dominant or multiple dominant religions here. And how do they interact with each other? And then military is like, you know, like obviously the military, like who employs the military? Is it the government? Are they all private armies, like mercenaries that are owned by multiple lords or something? Are they owned by the church? Does the church employ the army and therefore the church rules in this place? You can do all stuff like that. I know it's a silly word, mercs, if you want to be a bit more PG about it, but really you're gonna remember.
You remember one more, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's that's like really, really good advice. I suppose like there's definitely going to be a bit of crossover between this episode and the one we've done before about world building and like place names and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's, I suppose that one is more generally like how you do it and how to like create all that stuff. And this one, I suppose the difference would be we're going to get into it more about like how to deliver that and deliver like interestingly, and not have it be clunky and not literally have to sit down and for, like you said earlier, for like 5 minutes and just go, okay, everyone, like make a cup of tea, like light a cigarette. I'm gonna take like 10 minutes here and explain this country. And like I had to do a little bit of that myself, like yesterday, because my guys just got to my like sort of Greek Roman area, and like they got there and they were asking me questions, and I was like, okay, this is what you guys would know as people living in this world. You would know what these things, like how this country, the sort of like general big ideas of how this country works. Just like the way I explained it was like just how like we here living in Ireland know how like the US government works in terms of like they've got like the Senate and they've got like all that kind of stuff, and like how the UK's government works and that kind of stuff, you know.
You have a general overview of a lot of places, like just from passive like osmosis, just from being in the world.
And like people travel and talk to other people and information gets shared that way. And like I think I also like I think I also always do is I almost always put it in a library in at least one place in a country, like usually if there's like a university there or something, or maybe like this specific city. So like in my world near Quebec, the goddess of light is also a goddess of knowledge. And it's like a little play on the whole, like, you know,
being enlightened.
Yeah, being enlightened.
Stuff,
and that kind of stuff. And so like her primary temple in the it's called the City of the Gods, Darkville. There's like over 100 temples in this one city, because that's where the final battle. It's this continent that the final battle of the gods happened on, and it's the oldest city in the world. So like in her temple is like this giant glass church library. It's like this huge glass cathedral, and it's just filled with books, but like all of the walls, exterior walls anyway, are all glass, and the ceiling is glass to let as much light in as possible, because they worship the Lady of Light and her knowledge. And so like they like go around the world illuminating people with both knowledge and the light of hope, and that's kind of like their mission in doing that. So like it's kind of like build stuff in that way. And it happens anytime I start talking about like the lore of my world, I'll entirely lose the thread of what I was actually talking about and just get wrapped up in this other thing and this other thing and this other thing I like. But that's where the intro comes from, where I'm like, let me tell you this one thing for a moment, and then like
10 minutes later
I just in my head the SpongeBob, you know, 4 hours later, like the SpongeBob thing. So Conor, what would you say are probably like the things you mostly want to avoid when you're writing lore, in terms of like the big no-nos?
When you're writing it,
I suppose writing and delivering, we'll say.
Writing and delivering. When it's writing, I'd say try to stay, again, of course, Star Wars again, stay on target. It can be tempting, and honestly, again, I know I don't practice this, but that's just because I find it hard to focus on one thing at a time. Well, sometimes, but oftentimes I'll be like, okay, if I think of this other thing, I'm going to note it down now because I will forget it for later, but I kind of leave them in a big note, and I'll read through them later on and go, oh, that was a cool idea, maybe I should expand on that. And try to stay on what is, because we're talking about this from the perspective of D&D players and Dungeon Masters.
Yeah.
Try to stay on subject for what you're actually doing in game at the moment. If the current quest in your game involves going to an ancient forgotten city and there's a dragon living there and the dragon has a curse on them, you know, maybe write some of the history of that. It can be tempting if you get a bout of inspiration to run off and be like, oh, but I just thought about this thing with the dwarves, because they have this thing going on over here. And it's like, that's great. Make a note, like a quick, like jot down a quick note on your phone or wherever, and then move back to what you should be on. So definitely try to stay on subject at least, because it can be a lot of time and energy to write lore and stuff like that. You want to focus on the important stuff as much as possible. You don't want to spend like 3 hours writing lore for something, one, your players might never encounter because it might not come up in this campaign, and two, isn't necessarily pertinent to your next session. You know, again, as dungeon masters, that we should always be thinking about our next session or our next couple sessions. If you want to, aside from your prep for your next session, you want to write out this lore, great, knock yourself out. But you know, if we're doing it for the D&D game, make sure that it's for the D&D game. You know.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I know. I was just going to say, like, absolutely agree with you there. Like, if you're writing lore for your D&D, you're writing lore for your D&D world. So like, it has a purpose. Like, if you're spending your time to write this information down and actually get it down rather than just like thinking about it for the fun, unless that's specifically like something that's fun for you to do in your spare time, like that you like to write that story and you're like maybe thinking about like turning your D&D world into a book when it's over or something like that, right?
and like that's totally fine, but it can be like you can make that or put all that effort in, and then you might be a little bit frustrated, or you might feel like you've you know, get burnt out because you just spent like 3 hours writing all this stuff about dragons when your players are currently on like a celestial angelic kind of, you know, quest or something like that, and you have no way to tell them, and it can be like, it can be, I'm that DM that like I try really hard not to do this, but when I know there's something lore based going on here and you guys haven't picked up on it, at the end of a session I will just tell you, and I hate that. I like to keep stuff secret as much as I can, but also sometimes I'm just so proud of what I've written. I'm like, hey guys, just so you know, this is the thing I made. So yeah, like it can be frustrating if you do put all that time in only to then afterwards find out like, oh, I'm not going to be able to show this to people because this has no relevance to what's going on or anything like that. So definitely try to make it. You can make it more rewarding by saying, I'm going to make this thing now. This thing that I know will come up in the next 2 weeks of play, and I can explain it to players and stuff. Then that'll be my satisfaction. The work I've put in will pay off when the players go, oh wow, yeah, that sounds really cool. Let's go to that temple or whatever, you know.
Yeah, exactly, and yeah, I think exactly what you're saying. Like in terms of like just keeping it on point. Like a good example that I can give that from my own campaign is earlier on in my campaign when my players kind of got the hint that they're gonna started to get the idea that these things that are basically vestiges have been around for a while. They're important and they're probably going to be very helpful in defeating whatever the evil is that's coming. When they got that got the vibe that was going on, they started to research these things in libraries and stuff, and they went to specifically went to that library that I was talking about. It's called the Star Home. And they went to that library and they spent like, they did like downtime. They spent like, each of them I think spent like 2 weeks in that library researching, and like and they put in as much gold as they're allowed to put in to get as much of a bonus as possible. And I gave them a list of like, I think it was like 6. Oh, actually, I have it on this because that was still when I was writing stuff digitally, so I can actually check it here. But I give them a list of like 6 people who were thought, what they were looking for was people throughout history who had maybe possibly wielded these items of great power. And I'm trying to find it here. But basically they wanted. I nearly got the right one there. But they wanted to see if they could find anyone. I think I give them a list of like 6. Yeah, I give them a list of like 6 people who throughout history who were speculated to have maybe either encountered these or had used these, and out of those 6, just thinking now, I think out of those 6 that I listed, I think only one of those did they ever end up following through, and it was because it was the one that was most obviously tied to a player.
Right.
Yeah, it was that kind of most obviously tied. I'm still looking for a little bit here, but like, I didn't, like, in my head I had plotted out like the loose outlines of all of the plot threads related to each of those, or like at least an idea where that would go. But the one that I had a lot ready for, both mentally and written stuff down for, was the one I knew was most closely tied to one of my players, because that is definitely going to become relevant at some point, whereas all the others are just potential. Like, my guys ended up getting ones that were more kind of thematically suited to their players. And their characters, but like if they had pursued other ones on these lists, they're on this list I've given them, there are other items there that weren't necessarily so closely tied to who they are as a character, or like a sort of like symbolically representative of them. And if they had gone for the other ones, I would have abandoned one plotline and just written up that plot thread and like fleshed that out fully. So it's really about like cutting your cloth for purpose, I think is the way to describe it, and I think that's what you're kind of hammering at there as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's Because again, it's different if you're George R. R. Martin and you're writing a book or something like that. You can write it like until the book comes out. There isn't really any one direction you have to take. But when you're a dungeon master and you're mid-campaign, there are certain demands of where you have to try and cater to what's happening this week and next week and the week after in each of your sessions. This is more, I suppose, a lesson in just avoiding burnout as a DM more so than anything else. If you in this can be the same for session prep as well. Like don't put too much time into something that you don't necessarily think is going to come up. You can a big part of DMing is like ad-libbing as well. So making some stuff up on the fly if you need to, but have a general outline. But if you decide, okay, I'm gonna make this combat encounter, and it's gonna be really complex, and I'm gonna read up on all the stat blocks for the 5 different monsters I have in this encounter, and then also I'm going to draw a very, very detailed map of the room that I can put down on the table. It'll be super cool, and then the players end up not going that way in the dungeon and going a completely different way. That's gonna grade on you to the point where you'll just feel worn out, and you'll be like, the work I'm putting in isn't being utilized. And it's not the player's fault either. They don't know that you've put all this time into something. Like same with lore, they don't know that you've written this. You spent 3 hours writing about this thing, this dragon arc and all this and all the dragon gods and whatever.
Yeah.
When they decided that they wanted to go and fight the giants instead, So it's no one's fault really. Just well, except your own maybe. But but that can be avoided again just by laser focus as much as you can on what is relevant and what is pertinent to what's happening in your D&D game at the moment.
Yeah, I also find it really helps to write like what you enjoy. So like I enjoy like history and mythology, and like some of my favorite things in D&D is actually like the lore and the magic items, and same in video games, like the lore, the background lore, the magic items, stuff I can find out. So I incorporate that myself when I am writing lore. I will write lore into item descriptions. I will like give NPCs that are in relevant areas like fragments of lore, that kind of stuff, depending on what they're studying, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it definitely. I mean, that's kind of just a writing tip in general as well. Write what you know, write what you love, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because you should be enjoying the process. If you're the kind of like dungeon master who you find a lot of that stuff very grating, very irritating to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of a homebrew world and all that. Honestly, you don't need to do a whole lot. Like, if you really wanted to run a D&D world and you didn't want to come up with your own lore, or something I've been doing actually a lot with Kael'da, which is our Celtic kind of kingdom in the world, is I've just been reading up on Celtic mythology and stuff, and I'm straight up ripping characters from the Tuatha De Danann and the Fomorians and stuff like that, and I'll just put them in the world, and I'll take a vague description of them, and maybe they're a giant, and I'm not being super kind of
accurate.
I'm taking inspiration.
I didn't mean that in a bad way, by the way, either. That sounded way, as soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, oh no.
I'm not trying to be accurate though. I was reading up a thing about is it Elaine, Aillean, Elaine.
I'm not super familiar with that one.
I remember the Tuatha De Danann, and they play a harp, and they're like they love music and stuff like that, but they're constantly being described in all the writings I've seen of them as being a fiery being, like a person wreathed in flames.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, that would make an unbelievably cool Fey Lord, right?
Yeah.
Like an Archfey, just a flaming music wielding kind of Archfey. So I'm like, yeah, that's a thing. Now they're part of the Tuatha De Danann. Technically, that should be a god, but why does it have to be? They can just be an Archfey instead.
Oh yeah, there's like a bunch of really cool ones. There's like Silverhand, and there's Nuada. He's the king of the Tuatha De Danann, and he's basically the Odin equivalent. And he's called Silverarm because he's got he lost an arm in the battle. I think it's the Battle of Mag Torrid, which is actually the one. It was actually a battle with the Fomorians, I think, if I remember that rightly. But
usually is.
Usually is, yeah.
Those damn Fomorians.
But he lost an arm, and then the god of the smiths made him an arm from silver, and that's just such a goddamn cool visual. Is this this king of the gods with this perfect entirely silver arm that actually, coming to think of it now, that sounds an awful lot familiar to how remember Voldemort had his Destructo hand in Harry Potter, now that I think about it.
What you mean? You talking about when Wormtail
Oh,
had
Wormtail.
his?
Sorry, Wormtail. That's it.
It
Yeah.
was given to him by Voldemort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's suspicious. No,
Yeah.
joking, obviously. But yeah, like I do a lot of that myself as well. The area my guys are in right now is a Greek Roman place, and like it's got 5 city states, and I'm straight up just copying like the Italian city states from the Renaissance, like your Florence, your Milan, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I have 5 cities. They are Parthenos, Pila, Doctrina, Euclida, and Cadmia. And each of the names of those is informed by what that city does. So the Pila was the main spear of the Spartan hoplite. So that is the city that the Milesian, which is actually a term I stole from Celtic mythology as well, from Irish mythology as well. The Milesians were supposedly one of the first people to come to Ireland. So the country is called Pontamalud, and the people are Milesians. So like in Pila, that's where their military are, and then Cadmia, that is a corruption of Caduceus, which is the staff of Hermes, which is the symbol for medicine. So that is the city of healers. Pila is the city of spears. Then there is Doctrina. Your doctrine is your faith. It's what you follow and determines how you act. That is the city of the gods. And then that's the city of the oracle. Apologies, because they have the unique thing about this country is that they have an oracle of the goddess in Tiger, who's the goddess of justice, and she like has a direct line and basically communes with that god, and she decides when the way the military works is like if they want to go to war, they petition the oracle, and then the oracle petitions in Tiger, and if Tiger decides it's a just war, then the military are allowed to go.
That's cool. I like that.
It's ripped straight from that scene from 300 where they buy off the they buy off the oracle, the guys who translate the oracle, and the Persians buy them off so that they can't send the full 300. But I was like, it would be a cool idea to have that god associated that way. But yeah, like I do all that kind of stuff. I suppose in terms of like delivering lore, there's stuff you want to like generally avoid is a lore dump, or rather an exposition dump, because that is what we were talking about. We're like, it's going to take like 5 minutes, get a cup of tea, light a cigarette. We're going to be here for a few minutes, and I'm just going to talk at you, and you're going to like take notes or just sit there. And like, yeah, that works. It absolutely does work. And you know how we all know it works? Because a film that does that won a lot of Oscars, or rather a film series. Conor, how does Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring start?
With like a 8-minute flashback to like a battle that happened about 2,000 years prior.
So correct, but it is a lore dump because it is an exposition dump because it is Galadriel telling us how about the forging of the rings, Sauron making the One Ring, Sauron like bring like all the way up to the battle for the Battle of Middle-earth, and I have it on my other screen here, right?
9 rings.
And there are so it says Galadriel speaking partly now. She goes, "The world has changed. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. I smell it in the air. Much that once was is lost. For now, none. I cannot speak today. Much that once is lost. For none now live who remember it." And then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you're like, be generous and say 6 paragraphs after that, like, and it literally goes through the history of Middle Earth up to right now, because it goes up to Bilbo Baggins of the Shire, and like that is an incredible amount of like that is such a sizable exposition, but no one complains about it because it is done so well. You have Kate Blanchett reading it, the way it's structured and phrased, and all of the language used in it. Like, victory was near, but the power of the ring could not be undone. It was in this moment when all hope had failed that Isildur, son of the king, took up his father's sword. Like, it uses evocative language. It does everything right to.
It gives you good visuals as well. Like, it's showing you the rings being made. It's showing you Sauron in Mount Doom when the fires roaring up around him. It shows you all the dwarf lords taking theirs. It shows you the battle. It shows you Isildur's death. And it shows you Bilbo finding the ring and everything. Yep. There's, like, honestly, if it were that easy, like, if you could do some like visuals to like illustrate that, if you're an artist, actually, that might not be a bad idea. And you like drawing, and you're like, I need to do a little bit of an expedition. Help me out here.
Exposition,
thank you. Dump here for my players at the start of this new quest. When you talk about the dragon, draw a picture of the dragon. When you talk about this city, draw a city, the city on the mouth of a river. Draw a city on the mouth of a river. Giving them, and you could just put each of them on the table and pass them around
AI
to people.
To generate those images as well, if you can.
You could, as long as it's for non-profit.
Yeah, non-profit, obviously, and like because like all of those images are like scraped from a million different other images by other artists, which is why AI art is not art. Sorry, I had to get my controversial art opinion in on the podcast.
Not controversial, very accurate art opinion.
Thank you. But yeah, so like an exposition dump isn't always bad, but you just have to do it well, and like they do it really well. Even if you just read through the text of that, like I said, there's a lot of really evocative language. It sets a scene very, very effectively. And it gives you the highlights and high points. It doesn't get bogged down in details, which is actually something I find myself guilty of a lot when I give exposition. Is like, because I find it interesting, I will go down into the very, very narrow, small details about it. But realistically, it's probably not super important in terms of conveying what I want to convey to my players. So like, in terms of ways I like to actually like deliver lore, because I am a demon for writing lore and just getting really, really into lore and really like going from like normalish stuff to like really high level stuff for no good reason. And so when it comes time for me to actually like get that to my players, a lot of the time I kind of worry about how I'm going to get this to hit right and how I'm going to get this to stick in their head without just like drowning them in a wave of words.
And it can feel like that as well, particularly if you're not like a player who takes notes, or maybe you're just a player who's there. Maybe you're the murder hobo at the table, and you don't care. You just want to get going and kill some things. Stuff like that can be the kind of thing that very much slows you down. In terms of your play and stuff like that. I would encourage players, because DMs, there's a lot DMs can do for this kind of stuff. I'd encourage players as well just to like show interest to your, when your DM is explaining this stuff. Try to pay attention to them. Ask questions as well, even because it's nice to have that dialogue when it's not just one person, because it can feel like you're doing something wrong, and maybe you are to a certain degree when you're a dungeon master and you just talk at your players for 5 minutes. But if a player says, "Is that person this?" or whatever, let's get a bit of a dialogue going, and they can ask the questions. This is good for a couple of reasons. One, it makes your DM not feel like they're just spewing content at you, but also it can mean, one, you might get answers to questions that you might be curious about. Two, it shows the DM that you have, or three, I don't fair number, man, another number.
7.
It shows it makes it more of a conversation. So and it shows interest for the DM. I had a fourth point there. Nope, missing it. Damn it. Okay, forget it. I'll remember it in 7 minutes.
I also find as well that if a player asks me a question about something I'm not 100% concrete on, in the moment when they ask me the question, I will snap to a concrete decision on that.
Yeah, it can be good for putting you into that kind of thing. For clarifying your mind, because do you know what it is? It's like this thing. Sometimes when I can't make up my mind, what I'll do is I'll flip a coin and I'll assign it heads or tails, and I'll flip a coin. And then if I say, okay, do you want red or blue, Conor? And I say red is heads, blue is tails. I flip. I get heads for red, and if I get that, and I'm in the moment, in that split second, I'm not satisfied with it. I know I want it blue.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of a similar thing. Like, you might not be totally sure how you want your lore to work out, or what you want that thing to be. And when someone says, "Is this a thing?" and you go, "Yeah, sure, yeah, it is, yeah," because like you'll know, you're instinctually you'll kind of do that in the moment.
Yeah, no, totally. And I do find as well, like, I have other friends who aren't necessarily in this D&D game, but like if they ask me but they are into like fantasy or D&D or writing, and like they'll ask me how it's going, and I'll kind of like, they'll ask me questions about the world, or what's your D&D world like, and I'll kind of give like a brief summary, like, oh, that's cool, how does this work, and then you end up explaining things in great detail, and they're like, oh, actually this is slightly different than what I had before, but I actually prefer this, and that kind of, I find that kind of develops it on. But like, Conor, so like the reason I suppose I want to be asking you questions about this, because you've done this really interestingly a few times in our campaign, and there is one, and it's the one I mentioned earlier in the podcast, where I said that as soon as you did it, I was like, in a few years I'm stealing that from my campaign, and it's when we met up at Enfys, And Enfys, which is our former Bloodhunter Aerith's mother, who's an NPC in the campaign, and she saw my rage manifest for the first time, and she saw Owindir for the first time, and she recognized him because they're friends from way back during a war called the War of Three Blades. At which point you gave us all a character sheet from that war, and we played through that war.
Yeah, that was definitely one of my prouder moments in that. Yeah, so basically, context: you are a spirit
Ancestral Guardian.
Ancestral Guardian, thank you.
Spirit
so
Bar.
Obviously, I was halfway there. So yeah, there were. So rather than some people can like manifest their spirits and stuff like that, Lug at the start of the campaign basically just about died, but then got pulled back to life at the last second. And when he did, many souls, because he was on a battlefield that were also dying or dead, latched onto him and kind of clawed their way back to the living world, but they manifest in him. So he's basically haunted by like half a battlefield's worth of soldiers. One of these is an elf who wasn't in the battle, but actually died a couple hundred years prior. But in the middle of this battlefield is a standing stone that is actually his grave. So yeah, we when you guys met Enfys and she saw Owindir, she recognized him, and then she wanted to tell you the story because it was also relevant. Again, relevance. It was relevant to how your had the next arc kind of coming up had to do with the Fomorians and you guys fighting Balor, the king of the Fomorians, Balor the Conqueror. And yeah, so rather than me sitting down and saying, oh, this is what happened and this is the thing that she tells you everything that happens in your backstory, or rather your, because your ancestors' backstory, I told you guys, okay, I think it's the end of the session that happened. I said, all right, next week, no need to bring your own characters. I'll have characters for you, and you were going to play through the final battle of the War of Three Blades. And you guys are like, oh, awesome, sounds great. So I made up 4 characters, 4 or 5. I think you played...
I played Owen.
You played Owindir, yeah. Gavin, who was Aerith, played Enfys, his mother. We had Mike played... did Mike play the dwarf paladin?
I think so, yeah.
Something Giant's Bane or Giant Slayer or something like that. And then Dan played a cleric, a Furbolg nature cleric or something.
I think so, something like that, yeah.
Something on those lines. But so I made up a whole party, and there was a 5th member there with you as well.
Yeah.
Whose first name I'm forgetting, but his nickname was the Pale Hound, because he was a member of the Hound clan and he had very fair hair, so he's called the Pale Hound.
Finnan.
Sorry?
Finnan,
yes. Finnan?
Yeah, Finnan.
Yeah. So Finnan the Pale Hound.
Or like Fionnan, maybe, because like Fionn means fair or pale in Irish.
I think Finnan was just a name I came up with, but sure, it could be Finnan, why not? That probably makes more sense. But yeah, so you went through the whole battle, you fought Balor, you won. At the very end, rather than me just telling you or reading you out something and trying to make it dramatic, at this point we've been playing a full session. You guys were into these characters, you were playing as these characters, and then we had the moment where Finnan's father turns on Enfys and the other elves and betrays them. And I told you that Finnan was he was an NPC.
Yeah.
So I made out like Finnan was just I just put him in here to like buff out numbers because
in hindsight I feel very dumb.
But yeah, so I put him in there and I was just like, oh yeah, I actually did the encounters. I just need a 5th person for the encounters. Or this is Finnan. He's just a fighter.
I should have seen through that so quickly. like particularly because my character is the Black Hound, because I wear like all black armor with a big. Well, I used to wear all black armor, and I have a big black like black iron like hound helmet.
Yeah. So you went through the whole thing, and then at the last second, Finnan's father betrayed them. He was a king, and he's like, great job at the battle, now die. And it was really dramatic, and like I described how it all happened and how Enfys just about got away from the whole thing. No, she just survived, but she obviously has beef now with that kingdom because of this. Then I forget how I actually brought it about, but basically you find out that
I think I asked what happened to Finnan, and you were like, oh, he moved, like he like disowned, he like
oh, that's right.
yeah.
Yeah, Enfys, she said, I haven't seen. I literally saw him not long after the battle. He elected to go into exile. He didn't want anything to do with his father after that. So he went into exile. He disavowed his own family name and everything. I think he took up a different name, something like Lavazna or whatever, which is Lug's surname.
Yeah.
And it turns out that Lug's family is like he is the descendant of that self-exiled not quite prince, because prince is not really a thing,
Yeah.
but he would have been son, I think 6 ways back, 6 greats, I think we decided it was
Something like that.
so
Yeah.
so great grandfather
Yeah.
was the son of King Eric, who
Yeah.
was the traitor king in this case. But yeah, and Lug technically was the son of the great grandson of a chieftain of one of the clans in his kingdom. And yeah, but it was a cool way, because again, I could have told you that, I could have written that out in a dramatic way, and it probably would have been pretty impactful.
I still would have lost my mind.
Yeah, I think it would have been pretty impactful to Belle, to kind of, if I'd written it in the paragraph or something, and she said, yeah, we finished Valor, and then we went back and he turned on us, and then blah blah blah. Finnan left. He did this. Last time I saw him, he had changed his name to this and whatever.
Yeah.
It would have still hit, I think, but I think it hits just a little more because it's almost like seeing it's the movie thing of like show don't tell. And even though we are all playing in our imagination, I showed you by letting you guys play out the final battle and that betrayal as if you were those characters, which is the equivalent of cutting away to a flashback and showing you guys the thing on screen, rather than someone just telling you it happened. And yeah, and it worked out really, really well. And yeah, it's a fun idea. And I think, honestly, I feel like you could use that a lot in a lot of different D&D campaigns. If you have some story, or you want to, to illustrate what happened, you can always just do a one shot within your campaign that shows a series of events or a lore drop. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's a really good way to give yourself a bit of a break as a DM as well. Give you, like, shift up the story a little bit, do something a little bit more interesting. You've a new set of players to challenge with new abilities and new ways to challenge them with that too. And like for players, it's awesome as well because you get to try out whole new characters. Like,
yeah, and like you can make it really fun for your players as well, and just be like, cool. So you guys have been playing a ranger and a wizard and a rogue and a fighter or whatever for the past like 8 levels. You can make 8th level characters now. The only prerequisite is you need to be members of this kingdom's army, because they were knights from the army. But you can be a knight that's like a swashbuckler rogue if you want, or you can be a knight that's like a bard, a valor bard or something. Be whatever class you want to be, but as long as it makes sense that they're a knight. And that gives you loads of freedom as a player then to be like, oh, I've been playing a wizard for like 8 levels. I'd love to just play a bard now and just get stuck in and start hacking people with a sword. So I'm going to do that, And it can be great just to shake it up a bit.
Yeah, no, totally. One trick I did so I borrow a lot from in this world in particular. I found that I have borrowed a lot from Soften, the way they tell their stories and stuff, and with like putting lore in items and things like that, and like putting certain items in certain areas to kind of like tell a story with where, not just the item, but where you found it and what's around it. Like, so there was this one particular area, and I'd like, I'm gonna be super honest here, and it's a thing we all do, and it's the best. It's honestly probably like the best way to do it. Like, just rip stuff straight from things you love and edit them and twist them and make them your own thing. So in Dark Souls, I believe both in Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3, both of them, there's a painted world that you can enter through a painting. And in the first one, it's in this big mad cathedral, and like you literally like walk through it. In the third one, it's a scrap of the slave knight. He like holds this like scrap of painting up to you, and like you get a short cutscene where you just like reach out and touch it, and then you get pulled in there, and it's this entire other world, and you get this whole exposition about other unkindled and how this this like rot is setting into the painting, because this other unkindled, who, like, when you're an unkindled, your job is supposed to be to go and like kill the Lords of Cinder, relink the flame so a cycle of fire can start again, and an age of dark doesn't. But then you meet this other unkindled, and she has decided to not link the fire and instead live in this painted world forever, because she doesn't want to burn. She doesn't want to like give up who she is just to restart everything again. And like they do, I really like that idea. And my guys were looking for lore about the big bad Mercure and sort of like what happened with him. And I had foreshadowed earlier in the campaign that there's this like nomadic group of scholars called the Scrivatori, and they're sort of like chroniclers and collectors of like famous lore and like legends and certain magical items and stuff like that. And I had like foreshadowed that a bunch, and they'd come up a couple of times in like stuff they found in like when they were looking up the like vestige items in the library. The accounts they got of the people who were thought to have had them, some of them were collected by members of the Scrivatori. So at one point they found out that there was they actually met a member of the Scrivatori, because they had gotten famous enough and that they had gotten enough renown that one of them who had heard about them decided to track them down and had heard what items they had and rumors of what they were wielding, and decided to track them down and test and see if they actually had these items and if they were like suitable to wield them and like were going to be like champions of good and all that kind of stuff. So I had him come along, and similarly he had a scrap of painting with him, because the night that they used to have like a permanent base, and that was destroyed by Mercure. And again, this so it's like half between, I've ripped from Dark Souls for the painted thing, and then do you know the Chandrian in Name of the Wind? So my big bad took a similar approach to the Scrivatori that the Chandrian take to any knowledge about themselves, in that he was like, so the gods defeated me, my children, the gods who are my children defeated me beforehand. I'm trying to come back now. I possessed a mortal body with what little divine essence I have. If I want to come back again and win this time, if I destroy the people who keep all the knowledge about how it was beat the last time, like the specific knowledge, if I destroy all that, it's going to be much harder for anyone to rise against me again. So he actually took over the body of like a young kid who was about to be like inducted into the Scrivatori, used his body to like piggyback in there, and then killed everyone in the building and destroyed the building. But before that happened, there was a guy called Alessio the Accursed, and he was basically he was a prophet and a painter, and he would have visions and paint his visions. And so like the scrap of painting that this guy had was the last painting that this Alessio guy ever did. And now like I had this whole thing where like he had the last 3 paintings he had done were paintings of the party, then paintings of a country breaking of the thirds, and then a painting of the final battle where it was the party versus Mercure, and they're all like tooled up in the middle of the battle. And this happened like 3 or 4 centuries before any of them were born. And I could have just told them all that, and I could have had your man bring out the paintings and stuff, but instead I took the leaf out of Dark Souls and I had them go into a painted world that was like a painted representation of that fortress at the exact moment before it was destroyed. So they went through this weird kind of twisted funhouse mirror version where like everything that would have been there at that time was represented, but it was painted. So like there were like lights and candles and stuff, and if they went up to the candles they could put their hand through the flame, but there was no heat. It just gave off, and there was no heat, there was technically no light, but light was painted around it. And they made their way through and kind of eventually found a way up into a room where the spirit of Alessio was there, and he explained that to them and showed them the paintings. And then I had visions, and I've been waiting for you guys. I guess you were the people I saw, and kind of showed them the 3 paintings. And then they had to like do an escape run through there after this like wave of darkness crashed through it. And so like instead of just like explaining all that like I just did to everyone on this podcast for like the last 5 minutes, I had them play through.
Kids, here's what not to do.
Yeah, I had them play through this like mini painted world where it was like a bit of a mystery, and like they found like when they were going through there, they found like one of them actually found a painted representation of the vestige that they had that was in their vault. That they had that vestige Tidebinder. It's a vestige related to the god of the seas, and it's a trident that can turn into a cutlass as part of it, and it's got a couple of other abilities too. But that was with the Scrivatori originally, and then that when they had that fortress, and that fortress fell. The way my player got that item was he defeated a servant of Mercure to get it. So by putting that in there, I don't have to tell them that's how she got that. But when they saw that was in there already, and then put 2 and 2 together of, oh, this was in the fortress when he destroyed it, that's how Shang-Chi got Tidewinder.
Yeah, there's definitely some finesse that can be required. Like, obviously the lore dump is I think you want to avoid, because you don't want to give people this huge thing that's hard to digest or whatever, even if it's the most direct form of information.
Yeah.
But there can be a bit of finesse involved in trying to give people little bits of information and the right bits of information over the course of 10 sessions, so that on the 10th session you can go, well, you guys know this, and you know that this person was here at this time, and you also know that this person was actually related to that person. So if that's the case, you know, and you can even spell it out to them at the time, but while after giving them all the bits of information. It's why good planning, honestly, is kind of, I'm more I am more planned or more prepped for our more recent sessions, because we're coming to the end of the campaign, and I want to try and get things done in a reasonable kind of way. And I actually have my sessions planned out for like the first time ever. Before that, I was just like, oh, I guess in a couple sessions or whatever they'll get to this thing, but I had nothing set in concrete, because I leave it really, really open. But honestly, that's probably a little bit detrimental. Whereas if I was, I'm hoping to run a campaign for a few people who haven't played much in the new year, and it's going to be like a 2-month thing. So I'm like, okay, 8 to 10 sessions tops. So I'm actually going to plan out. They're going to learn this thing here and this thing here, and then they can put it together. And if they're not putting it, I also think if they're not putting it together, if you give them the hints or whatever, because it's hard to come up with what are the right hints and when is the right time to give them, that makes sense.
And what you're too vague.
Yeah, exactly. Because you also don't want to be too obvious with it and give them one hint and they immediately go, oh, so that guy must be this, and oh, damn, that was meant to be the big reveal. So you try to be vague, but if you're too vague, it's like these pieces don't go together because nothing looks right, you know. So I would even say it's perfectly fine to, over the course of X amount of sessions, give them little bit, and then if you have to, in the 5th or 10th session or whatever it is, if you have to spell out for them, oh, well, this guy looks exactly like this guy, but you know that guy is dead. And I mean, if you have to spell it out for them, you can. And it'll still hit. It'll still be a great moment, because they'll be like, oh, because this thing. And, you know, the story can still, you know, benefit massively from that. That those histories, those lores, even if they aren't the ones themselves who come up with it. If they do, great, but you also can't expect people necessarily to remember, unless they're really good note takers like Martin here, what happened. What happened like 5 sessions ago.
I threw you a wild card this week from asking you a question about sessions that happened like 8 months ago.
Oh, with the one-off thing?
Yeah, no, not the one shot. When those like monster things, the robot-y things attacked us this week in our session. Is this? I was like, for context, we're entering into like a necromancer's lair inside this mountain to fight a shadow dragon. And these weird like monster. In my head, I thought they were like undead. They're undead constructs or whatever. Attacked us.
They're machines. Yeah, they're machines.
Yeah, they're machines. Yeah. But in my head, I thought they were like half flesh, half machine. And it just immediately sparked in my head that like 8 months ago we were in this giant fortress and this like Nothic was making these like demon robots to fight people and like keep his stuff safe, and I immediately went, Conor, is this one obscure NPC from like 8 months ago? And I was ridiculously excited about it.
It honestly took me a really long. Here's the thing. In that moment,
I also got his name wrong 4 times.
Yeah. Yagus was his name.
Yeah.
It took me, first of all, it took me a while to know who the hell you were talking about. But the problem was, like,
I also didn't say One Eye or Nothic, which really would have helped.
Yeah, probably. So it took me a really long time to figure out who you're talking about. And the thing is, like, I also thought about it, like, can that fit? Could that be a thing?
Because he wanted a magic ring, and it was the wish ring, and we were like, oh, does he want the wish ring so he can wish himself back to his like normal form instead of a Nothic? Because a Nothic is sorry, this is how my brain works. This is how like
you're right on that much. Anyway, he did that. That is why he wanted the ring to
wish
himself back to.
That I knew. That I knew.
Yeah. But yeah, and like when you said that, then I was like, first of all, I had to think about it for way too long, and then when I finally realized who you were talking about, I was like, does that fit? And I'm like, I don't think it does. I was trying to think, could I make, like, again, deciding in the moment. I was trying to make, could I make that lore be a thing? And then I was like, probably not, realistic. I don't think I can make that work. No. So in the moment I decided against it. Also, in the moment I decided against it, but also, if in the moment I went, yeah, then you guys wouldn't have believed me, because if I knew he was involved, I would have known exactly who you were talking about in the moment, and I spent way too long trying to think of who you're talking about to convincingly say, yeah, he's definitely involved here.
Yeah, I know.
So unfortunate. So sometimes players, that does happen a lot as well. I'll have something written myself, and then someone will go, "Oh, are these two things related?" And I'm like, "Nope. I wish I'd thought of that myself. That could have been cool, but."
Yeah. So oh man, like, God, there's a bunch of stuff like that. Like my player, like just the sheer amount of like cool stuff my players have just like asked me offhand, and I'm like, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's how it works indeed. I'm master, genius, planner, smarty man, me.
Yeah, I think I'm relatively good at my poker face as a DM until moments like that come up. Like sometimes I'll
I have a horrendously bad poker face.
I just kind of go. I mix my poker face with mindfuckery, because like someone will be like, "Oh, inside check on this guy because I don't trust him," and I'll be like, "Sure," and I'll like roll an inside check, and then I'll roll a d20, and I might be rolling the deception check, and then an experienced player would go, "But you just rolled the deception check to try and beat me," and I'll even go like, "What did you get?" And I'll go, "Okay," and I'll check this. And then they'll go, "Oh, but he's obviously trying to deceive me if you're rolling that check." And I'm like, "Yes, that is obvious, unless I'm actually just doing this to fuck with their head, because there's no deception required, because he's telling the truth." And then like, and like, so like I'll do that. I think I'm quite good at that kind of stuff. I'll just, you know me. Occasionally I'll just take a d20 and I'll roll it, or I'll take a d6 and I'll go.
You're such a fucker for doing that, and I hate it.
But honestly, I feel like you need.
Well, I like hate it though. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah, but I mean, you need that sometimes, because like, again, like, it's like when players are like, no. Here's the thing, right? When you start doing things as a DM, this is completely off topic. When you start doing things as a DM, the players know something's about to happen. So you need to constantly be doing things so that they never know when something is actually going to happen. So when the players are like, "Oh, we're going to head north and through the forest up to the thing," I'm like, "Sure, okay, cool. Just roll a d20 or roll a couple dice, and then like pretend to make a note or something like that, and go, cool. So you guys are heading this way, and then just go back to it." That could have been nothing. But when you actually need to roll a survival check for the person who's currently tracking the party, then the players won't know you're legitimately doing that for something, and they'll think it's something else. Yeah. So you need to have those false flags constantly. Honestly, I think it's one that, and again, especially with like experienced players, because again, any long-term player will know that when you're trying to deceive someone, it's insight versus deception. So of course I'm going to be like, yeah, okay, I'm obviously going to roll a deception here, but I need to do this, or am I, like, is this person actually lying? And likewise, when someone rolls low on an insight check, I sometimes I won't tell them like, "Oh, you don't know." Sometimes they'll roll low, and or even they'll just miss the DC. It'll be like I'll roll for deception, I'll roll like an 18. And they'll get like a 16 and think that's actually pretty good, and I'll go, yeah, you think he's lying to you, but he's actually not. You just rolled too low, and you're misinterpreting the situation. Because again, true. Like, you roll low enough that you don't know.
Yeah.
And it's but if I just tell you don't know, that just means, like, I don't know. That can be a bit vague, and I kind of like just giving you false flags as well to follow. Occasionally, you guys will. It's the whole. It's the whole thing that happened in Critical Role campaign 2 with the chair, and they were convinced it was trapped or magic and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And like, but sometimes letting that kind of stuff run is kind of fun, and players can obsess over something or think that this is the case because it's that whole it's like if you're playing a video game, you don't know if something's about to happen because you don't see the PlayStation or your computer do a thing. You don't see it rolling dice.
As soon as you see the autosave, you start panicking though.
Well, yeah, except for the autosave. Or the thing where it's like...
why is this... hang on, I was in a forest, and now there's this big clearing.
Why did this
There's
music
a
suddenly start playing?
There's a. Oh no! There's the health bar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, yeah, but
Ah.
so sometimes there's indicators, but
Yeah.
I try to minimize them as a DM. See, well, okay, you can't minimize them because you're at the table, so people will see when you pick up a dice and a roll it. They hear the clang, and they'll know you roll the dice. So like you need to bluff that by instead of trying to hide it, you're trying to hide it in plain sight by rolling so often that they don't know which ones are the real ones.
Yeah. Or alternatively, if you could roll the digital dice, you can do a GM roll.
Well, if you're doing digital, you can do that, correct?
Yeah.
But I'm talking about even then, when you're with your players,
They'll notice you typing and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and stuff. But even you can do it when if you're digital as well. Just like announce that you're about to roll a d20. Just be like, okay, you're rolling for this. Okay, cool. I'm just gonna roll a quick d20 here, and then don't say anything. Just leave it off.
Yeah. I thought it would be fun to talk about because we're coming towards the end of the episode. Some media and stuff that we like that we think delivers lore really interestingly. There's one I've brought up and I actually ran a one shot for us based around this word, which is the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks. In that series, magic is broken into basically the primary colors, and there I think it's four. Yeah, it's the primary colors of light basically. Do you know like the main colors of the spectrum of light, and basically the main character is a prism, and he is both a political and a religious figure, and it's his job to balance because the world naturally produces this color magic which is called luxin, and if there is too much of one color in one area, it will basically create like a monster made out of this luxin, or it can create like magical storms, or it can and like natural disasters and stuff like that.
Only the Avatar.
Yeah, Avatar. But imagine if one class of the Benders started replacing their skin with crystal.
Pretty metal.
Yeah,
sorry,
they're
crystal.
That's the that's the blue luxin guys. But like, so like the way he tells you the way he frames all this and how this happens, he doesn't just go through like, and this is the Church of the Luxon, and this is the like this is the prism, and the prism is that, like, you get all that as you go through it, but when you meet the character's name is Gavin Gull, and when you meet him first, he is on the hunt for one of these creatures. They're called a color white, and he's in an area of the
that's clever, the color white. That's clever.
And there is actually a political figure called the White, and she is a drafter and a colour mage who has given up drafting to be completely impartial, because the magic also has an emotional effect on you based on what the colour is.
Yes, yeah.
It's a very, very cool system, but the way we're introduced to how that world works is through his eyes as he's performing those duties. So like he's out there hunting color whites to put them down to make sure people are safe, because there are people who have used so much color magic they essentially become magical monsters, and they alter their bodies based on what it is. Blue ones, like I said, they replace their skin with crystal and make themselves all like sharp and jaggedy. Green ones kind of turn into these like savage bestial monsters, so on and so forth. But it's him chasing down the color white. Then he goes and he deals with a magical storm. He deals with pirates. He does all this. Then he comes back to his hometown where he lives, and to his like office. And then after he's done all that, then there's like a big ceremony where he goes up and magically balances all the magic together. And like he does all this, you see it through his eyes from his perspective as he does it, without having to sit down and read like a literal like Silmarillion style. And so on that was the father of this, and they married this person, and then they had children together, and they had 4 more children, and then like that kind of stuff, without having to do that very big long. And like, I'm someone who loves history.
His name was Durin, like, and his 7 sons were also named Durin for some reason. But and everybody's named Durin.
I am someone like I will read stuff like that and I don't mind. Like, some of it I might get on my nerves, but I'd say I have a higher tolerance than the average person, because I really like history. But like, when you're delivering lore, you want to try and make it engaging rather than like I said. Unfortunately, sometimes you're just going to have to exposition dump. Sometimes it's just going to happen. It happens in most great stories, like point that even in Lord of the Rings. But if you can do something like what Conor did with putting us directly into the War of the Three Blades as the characters in the final battle, or having like NPCs just have a dialogue with someone. And they that way the player can ask questions, and then they can you can find out exactly what they want to know that way. So that way you have I say you have like the backlog of the lore you have written for this NPC, allow them just to have a dialogue. Don't necessarily rattle all that lore straight off. Allow them to have to have a conversation back and forth, and naturally discover that information through conversation. Like if you engineer a situation where your players are meeting a specific NPC who has a lot of that information, most likely it's an unusual situation, or there's a mystery or some kind of knowledge that the player wants, and that is going to drive them naturally to ask questions that will give you the opportunity to present that lore, and then it won't feel like an exposition up, it'll feel like a conversation.
You can, yeah, and you can do something I think is a good tip is doing like bite-sized things. Like is you can literally like write up like buzzword sentences where like
Oh, I've got like actually because I found, remember saying I wrote those like those that list of like mythical figures who had these objects. I eventually found it. So like I did like I'll give you an example of a really short one. So one of the vestiges I did was the death mask of the charioteer, and this is literally all the info I gave them for it. Now they never pursued this, but like this is just like this is exactly what you're talking about, like a little blurb almost. One of the treasures of the Church of Scarfa. Scarfa is the god of death in my world. It was stolen long ago by a Jinn during a raid of a gathering of the church on its holiest day, the winter solstice. The Jinn disappeared in a gout of flame, taking the death mask with him to the fire plane. Ever since, champions of Scarfa have journeyed to the fire plane to recover their lost relic, but none have succeeded. As a consequence of this is that worshippers of Scarfa commonly swear oaths of vengeance against Jinn kind.
that's pretty good. Like I was gonna be like I was gonna be even shorter for me, honest. Where like if a character comes in and like someone they have interesting looking armor on or something like that, they've really interesting looking armor, and you could be like, everyone make in history checks or whatever it is, and then like you don't even, in some cases you're not even necessarily looking for a DC. Sometimes I have you guys all roll checks, and I'm like, whoever gets the highest is the one who sees us or the one who knows this thing. Rather than it being a set DC, it's one of you guys knows this. We're doing a random roll to see who it is, and it might be the really obscure person, but they might have heard this one thing of lore. Then I'll turn to them and I'll just go, oh, you know that these guys, you've heard of these guys before, you've never seen them. These are a group of knights that live in a temple in the northern mountains. They're isolationists. They don't like outsiders, so people don't ever go to visit them. But occasionally they come down from the mountains only to hunt whatever, jinn, dragons, whatever it is. So if one of them is here, there might be a jinn or a dragon involved, and then like that's enough that like, okay, that's interesting, you give me some information on these guys. I know they're isolationists. I don't like outsiders. I know they wear unique armor, and I know that they hunt these things for a living. And if people want to ask more questions, they might ask that character, that NPC, or they might just say, what else do I know about this, or can I learn more about that? And then you can do it. But like, sometimes less is more when you just give them a little bit, and then they can be like, oh, that sounds interesting. How does that work? And then you can give more. It may not be the reams and paragraphs that you want to be able, because you spend however long writing it, but sometimes less is more. Honestly, all you need to say is like, oh yeah, there are a group of knights who wear black armor and live in the northern mountains. If that in itself isn't super interesting and immediately makes you want to know more about that group of knights, then like sometimes that's all you need. You just need you need just a little bit, because it's like anything sweet or anything tasty, like people like ice cream, and if you go, here, try this, and oh, that's really nice, I might have some more of that. But if you go, here's 10 bowls of ice cream, like, people are gonna be like, Jesus Christ, I'm gonna be sick everywhere.
That meme of Homer in hell.
Yeah. Have all the donuts you want.
No, there's like, again, like, it's I'm gonna bring up from staff for like the 17th time on this podcast, but they do a lot of that, where like you'll pick up an armor set and like, man, this is a really cool armor set, and then like you go to view it in your inventory, and like you press a button to view it and it'll show you like the full picture. But when it shows you the full picture, there's also like a blurb of lore, and like there'll be stuff like one of the boss weapons you can get is from, you kill a boss and they're related to they're the bosses from this order of like hollow hunters, or like they're an order of knights that hunt down the abyss, and they stop the abyss rising wherever it appears, and they are tied to a boss from the first Dark Souls game called Artorias the Abyss Walker, and he's this like legendary knight who traversed the abyss and defeated the abyss way back the age of like heroes when Gwyn was king. And so these guys are called the Abyss Watchers, and their order was founded by him. And if you kill them, you get their soul, and you can make their soul into a boss weapon, and you get a choice of 2 weapons with that. You can either make the Farron longsword and knife, which is like those guys' standard fighting gear. It's like a parrying knife and a greatsword. Or, because in the description of their gear, it says all these knights are linked by wolf blood, linking them all the way back to the original Abyss Walker, Artorias. So when you look at their soul, you can also make Artorias' greatsword, because his soul is linked to theirs. And that's like inherent storytelling within how an item works.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like to do that as well, actually. I did that with a couple of your...
Yes, both my spears. Both my spears you've done that with, and I really, really enjoyed them. I was even, at one point I was even going to make a collar for Frost that had a name that was based on the description of the Moonslayer.
Oh, yeah? Cool.
Yeah, because you said the Moonslayer spear was broken by the Dreadwolf Fendril. So I was going to make Frost this like magic item that was like a collar that would make him grow big and like do cold damage, and he'd have like cold mist that would like stream off him, and it was going to be called the Collar of Fendril.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I just as much as I hate to give you any more encouragement in how much you love the FromSoft games, yeah, like environmental storytelling like that, where you give them stuff like that, it can be really, really beneficial, because
play
again,
the games,
like
Conor, play the game, play Elden Ring.
I'll get to it. At the moment, what do I have on played at the moment? Well, no, we're gonna have to wait now, Mary.
Dragon Age. Yeah.
Well, I'm on the last DLC of Dragon. No, sorry, I'm not. Oh no, I'm actually. Oh Christ. Okay. I'm enjoying it, but like I put like 70 something hours into it already. Like,
we will report in on the podcast after Conor has played Elden Ring, whenever that may be.
Whenever that may be. But Martin.
Yes, Conor.
That's all the time we have for today.
Hey, that was a lot of fun. No, that was a lot of fun. I really like, obviously, you can probably tell from listening to us, both of us really like talking about our worlds and how we come up with lore and how we world build, because that's a big part of, at least for me, the reason why I got into DMing is like I really enjoy storytelling and like making cool stuff and seeing and telling someone something that I made up and then having them go, oh, that's really cool. That makes me feel real good. But yes, if you have any questions, comments, or anything else you want to tell us about, you can leave it in the comment section below. You can also contact us on Twitter at the Micflayers podcast.
For now, anyway.
Oh god, we won't even start on that, or we'll be here for another hour and a half.
No,
but sorry,
that's not.
I appear to have had a stroke mid-sentence there. So yeah, if you want to find myself on the internet, you can find me on Twitter at So Sorry It's Over, and you can also find the Micflayers podcast on Twitter for now, as Conor said, at Micflayers Pod. Conor, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on the internet on Twitter for now at 0.Conor, ZEROPOINTCONOR. One N, very important. I got caught in my cable here. You can also find our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor Breaker, and Radio Republic. But primarily, and that's I messed up my outro. It doesn't matter. Primarily, you guys can find me on the Micflayers podcast here every Friday, 6 p.m. Irish time, on all the aforementioned platforms, and on myself and Martin on our Twitter handles on the lower screen. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, of the Micflayers podcast. Indeed. And we will see you guys next time.
We'll see you soon, folks. Bye bye.